Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox, and let me just add to the beginning of this video a couple of ideas. The first of which being that in the words that I'm actually going to be saying in this video and how I'm verbally going to be assigning things to tier lists, they actually get quite clustered up. I really only use the C, A. No, I go from S to C. Okay. But actually, I felt like it needed to be spread out a little bit more. I felt like there were reasons I could make distinctions, and I felt like there were some elements that fell in between, and that led me to say, okay, would it make more sense if I just expanded this a bit and kind of blew up some of the differences in the way that they're represented visually on the tier list? Personally, I think that, other than Wind, I don't think anybody is really below B tier. Everybody has play. But the meta is just so different now because there's been such an intense recent power spike, or series of power spikes really, that there are particular units that are just way better than other units in the game right now. And a big part of the way that the whole balance of any type of combat works out is largely how well you can build around them. And that really creates a deficit for the elements that have not gotten meta-defining characters recently, because while they may be about to get them, while they may be about to get an infusion and get a lot better, currently with only a few of these units that feel like they're on another power level than everything else in the game being released, and those not being spread evenly throughout the elements, I think there is actually a case to be made that it is more spread out the way that I'm going to visually represent in this video. The other thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to get to Rainbow first, so we're going to be talking about that directly after this, but largely I'm talking about Strike, even though I think for people who are really prepared for a certain playstyle, and honestly, like I got most of it, I just didn't get Summer Glaciella, and she's honestly the most important part of this, but you can make a really incredible Red Mage Rainbow team, or even Red Mage Water team that's actually stronger than other Water teams because it has access to better vision cards in some ways, but also kind of flexible access. And you're getting kind of the best of the job-based VCs while still getting the master ability bonuses for same elements. So while this does end up playing into water really well and is probably some of the strongest water teams are actually job-based, they're water red mage teams, there are also red mage rainbow teams that can really utilize Summer Glaciella to her best as a rainbow unit. Now, when I talk about her being like included on teams, it's often not because she's a red mage and there's a job synergy. However, that is a really great reason to put her as a curveball on a rainbow team that people won't expect to be rainbow. For instance, if you have, say, Starlight Elena up front on your team, or say Dwayne up front on your team, then people might be expecting either a light or a dark team, something rather straightforward. And then suddenly there's a Summer Glaciella on the field and pick other red mage of choice. So there's a lot of good options there, and I actually, low-key, think that this is one of the strongest teams in the game. And if I was actually breaking things, like, it would be S tier. The team that I'm talking about here, like specifically the Red Mage, Water, Glaciella, Ferris synergy team, that specific team is itself S tier on this list if it were its own little island. But unfortunately, water carries a lot of the baggage of every other water team, and in some ways lightning does too. These aren't the ideal top elements really. Over time and stronger units, I think other units have more room to shine, especially the ones that are currently in, because all the ones that I ended up listing in tier, well, they counter something that's going on right now really well. They're an elemental counter, or they're just set up really well, or they're well balanced. but they don't really have a champion yet to lead them into S tier. And I think that, once enough of those elements start getting into S tier, it's very strongly likely that lightning will definitely fall out and that water will fall even further than it currently is. But with all of that being said, let's get into the video. Jeez. Today I am going to be doing a tier list ranking for the elements in War of the Visions right now. But one of the things that I want to point out first, and it's kind of hard to say that it is necessarily I just gave it away. So it's hard to say that Rainbow is necessarily S tier, but Rainbow teams have, there are a lot of them that have a lot of flexibility. Like, Strike is amazing right now, and you see a lot of top tier units in Strike for various elements, and often units that maybe aren't as good as some of the other units that are valued as highly as they are in some ways. But their value within the meta is that they are the element that they are on a Strike team, which allows you a counterpoint to a certain other mono-elemental playstyle that you can play around. Edward being a great example of this, because, Alaya is the powerhouse that Strike has always wanted. So, people were thinking about how to counter Strike, think about Earth, but Earth teams have a lot of trouble against something like Adamantine Pillar Transmutation, especially if they're evasion from Edward. Even if they're not evasion, that's still a very powerful select 2 targets ability that actually really well complements Alaya's own offerings. He's only handicapped in that he can only hit 2 targets and she can hit 3. And, you also have, Perrine, who is going to potentially help with Soul, but I wouldn't necessarily think that she's going to do the best job of it. But she, I guess, will give Soul players a little bit of pause. And, by the way, just want to get this out there now. In this ranking, I'm not going to be considering our new Fire Mage quite yet. And that's mainly because I think the way that he shakes out in revitalizing fire is a little bit hard to say at the moment. I think fire might have a really good mixed team with an evasion unit, Yuffie or Sorrow, but probably, I don't know, maybe at this point Yuffie. Definitely, because she's the ultimate evasion curveball, one-off evasion unit, in that she has a really good evasion on her own, but also has sure hit evasion, and still not many characters have both of those things at this point. So Yuffie is a good option. King Mont is a good tank that keeps getting upgraded and keeps getting really relevant upgrades for himself. So he's hanging in there really well, and I think will continue to serve a fire team well in the future. And then you have someone like Soul, who gives you just, powerhouse status. This is your DPS. You have a curveball, a tank, and a DPS, essentially. I think Fire could do okay with that, but we're not there yet. The one reason that I will say that, Soul is interesting is that, in theory, you would say, potentially, from the way that this game is shaken out prior to this point, that it would be likely that, given that we have a meta where, 2 of the most powerful units, or really the 2 most powerful units, are water and lightning, that a new fire unit wouldn't be that incredible. And yes, Soul is probably going to have a hard time against other water units. Water is particularly anti-magic historically, but against Summer Glaciella, she doesn't really have any way of countering magic. Even if he is fire and she has resistance via element, her aura is purely physical. She's not doing all of the things that make her special. So yeah, she's still a water unit. It's not an ideal matchup, but I think the power of Summer Glaciella, the power that's ignored by mages essentially, is what makes her special, not just her element. It's what makes water teams occasionally able to and beat certain types of lightning teams as well if they're a little unprepared for how strong Summer Glaciella is. And like, it feels weird that the strongest unit in the game is almost certainly Lightning. Lightning is getting more and more support, and there's more support coming, but at the same time, Lightning has a little bit of risk, actually, running into its counter element that still it can be beat. Does this mean that water is better as an element than lightning? And I think the answer there is probably no, and that's for a lot of historical reasons. I mean, really, I think a big part of this resurgence probably lies at the feet of both Summer Glaciella and Ferris. If you don't have a team that at least has those two units, then your water team probably isn't doing great right now, and definitely isn't in a place where it can beat even an off Elia the Alabaster. But Summer Glaciella and Ferris in combination actually have the ability to do that. So I think my next tier ranking here is going to be to say that while currently Lightning is in S tier, I think that Water is here with Rainbow in the A tier, to where it's definitely really good. Especially against physical. I mean, just the amount that Summer Glaciella can nullify physical teams' efforts is truly magnificent. And, you know, I just can't say enough about it. It makes her a really good tank in a way that just transcends everything that we've had so far in terms of tanks. Even though, you know, a tank like Roth has been released recently and is really powerful. That being said, I think like Roth, Greater Demon, and Sephiroth, that kind of combination there, with a third unit, which is kind of in flux. It depends on what you want, but those two, they're a really strong pairing, and I think that earns Dark a place in A tier as well. Also, a good contender for A tier, I would say, is Earth. And that's because it's going to have a lot of lightning to pick on. Now, much like the matchup of lightning into water, Earth into lightning can be pretty dangerous as well, because you're really fighting some of the strongest teams. And especially like if it's Elia the Alabaster up front, it could be splashing wind. So it's kind of dangerous and a risky position to attack from, but it is one element that's doing really, really well right now and kind of thriving in this. And I think for that reason, it's also going to be A tier. And then I think the kind of thing that we're all kind of beating around here is that Lightning is almost certainly S tier. Despite what I said about its matchup against Water, it's a big part of beating everything else, and it also just has the newest units. And I know I said I wasn't going to factor in Soul in particular, but I do have to point out that it looks like there's even more Lightning support coming in another month. Lightning is going to be a big part of the next month as well, so I really think the prospects for Lightning are a lot more clearly good. And I mean, they've already been on such a streak that I was actually surprised that they're still getting more. It feels really one-sided. It's like Gumi had a stick in their craw about the fact that the element that they had assigned to so many protagonists like Cloud and like Lightning herself, or even the newest Squall, was competitively not doing great. And they said, well, we're going to rehabilitate the shit out of this element. We're going to give it everything it could possibly need. And there's still more of that coming. So Lightning is looking like it's going to be the strong element early on into this. But at the same time, like a new Halloween unit, I mean, I was surprised at how impactful the new Summer unit was. Summer units often look good when they come out, pun kind of intended, but they don't age well often. But Summer Glaciella is just so good that it actually gives me a certain amount of hope that the Halloween unit that they choose might actually be impactful as well. So if that's in a different element than I've already put on the board, or in one that I already have, that could elevate that element into S tier, just on the back of that single unit strong performance, if you have them, of course. As an aside here, we do actually know the answer to that question, and unfortunately it's going to be another 70 cost unit. So it is going to be a boon for certain 70 cost units, both in Dark and in Earth, who are both on the screen. So that's going to be nice, but I don't think that Vampire Lucio is necessarily going to be shaking up the meta in the way that I'm talking about here. Really, it would need to be a new 100 cost unit. I do think that as a 70 cost unit, he's going to be an easy thing to pull for, and if you really don't have good stuff at the moment, or you're a newer player, then maybe this is a really economic way to get a pretty good unit. But I really don't think for players that have good Earth play, he's going to be all that great, especially people who are doing good in the Earth meta right now. Potentially Earth Evasion players, though, seeing as he is an evasion unit. But again, not really a powerhouse. But also, Earth Evasion right now, unfortunately, is probably using Catone. And there might be some ways in which I like Catone better, but not really. If he is evasive enough, then maybe he can replace Catone on my team. But, I don't think he's replacing Zazan as another 100 cost Earth Evasion unit with multiple types of survivability. It just doesn't seem super likely. Although, he isn't aging horribly well himself. He just happens to be good at what he does. And, there's also the fact that I've already kind of kicked Catone off of my Earth team in favor of Renoa. So... there really is no room for Lucio on that team either, and I feel like I'm the person, or at least specifically the type of Earth player who is most targeted by Lucio. So unfortunately, it doesn't seem that the Halloween units are going to do a whole lot in the same way that the summer unit did, but tons of spooky fun to be had. And before we get back to our regularly scheduled video, let me also plug my podcast, Fox Talks After Dark. Usually it's about, adult topics, the kind of things we discuss and do at night. And I'm not getting into that on this channel, but I am going to be doing an episode coming up later this month, a spooky episode. It's going to be about vampires and zombies, the history of both in film and what they represent, but also how they work as metaphors for class and how they represent a sort of class spectrum in the monster world, which is kind of interesting to think about, really. So, with all of that being said, I don't think Halloween Lucio, I don't think Vampire Lucio is really going to move the needle for Earth, but it's nice to have. I mean, it's nice. It looks like it is a cool TMR too, so I guess it's a bonus to certain Earth players. Maybe if you didn't get Zazan, because he is fairly limited himself and also pretty difficult to get and to build at this point in the game. If you weren't around when he came out, he might be a little bit harder to max out for you. There are some, I'm not saying there's no reasons to pull for him. I just don't think he's going to move the needle in this big a scale. I think that demonstrates the kind of transitionary time we're in within the War of the Visions meta right now. It's kind of being redefined, in that one strong character that you can build an element around, especially if they aren't limited, is, even if they are limited, unfortunately you can't get Summer Glaciella anymore, so that's another reason, that despite the fact that I think that they're duking it out for number one right now, in a way, they're going to be, it won't age well or it won't age as well as Elia the Alabaster, which is someone that we can all potentially pull eventually, as opposed to someone that we have to wait till next summer to maybe get more shards for, except for the slow trickle. So she's going to be hard to reincarnate, and over time, as the Elias get stronger and the Summer Glacialas just stay the same, Lightning is definitely going to overtake even the strongest of water teams easily in the long run. So for Lightning, that's not a thing that I'm really as concerned about. For my first element in B tier, I'm going to say Light. And this is because while Light is doing well right now in some ways, like Light is also enjoying that Dark has been doing well. Light has also been fairly privileged, I would say, in the amount of Dark teams that it has been able to cope with especially well, with a DPS like Stern, with Bart's, those two power injections, Addison Ray, all of these things have made Light able to deal often with Dark pretty well. And that's a pretty great niche to have, especially when Dark is doing pretty well, and especially when Dark is such a popular, especially defensive element, and has been for so long, just because the Dark wall was strong pretty much from when Sephiroth was released until, I don't know, shortly after Raph, ironically. Even though she is a huge power injection into that very formula, and is, to this day, now critical and crucial for it. There was a big power injection that hit everything after that. That's just keeping up at this point. Which is sad. I kind of predicted that her shelf life might get hindered a bit, but woof. But still, their ability to pick on an A-tier team reliably, even if that team is actually kind of overrepresented, or at least was, we're seeing people start to diversify. We're seeing people realize that there are better things than just Dark and more interesting walls to run. So we're seeing a lot less of it, and that's really hurting the value of Light, I would say. So Light was probably previously A tier because they could deal more easily with Dark, and Dark was probably S tier just because, look, everybody's using it, okay? Its technical prowess may not matter. It is the meta because it's what everybody has, because so many people went hard on Sephiroth and built a team around him and invested heavily into that, and are kind of stuck with that investment and making the most of it. And that brings us finally to some of the losers. I'm not entirely sure where to put Ice, because in theory there have been a number of strong Ice units recently. We have good Ice Slash units. Velis is still a great unit, really good at supporting anything you throw in here. You could also splash in the new Ice Jaden, and you could do kind of an Ice Magic team. There's a lot of ways to go and a lot of new ways to go, but a lot of the backbone of Ice has atrophied. Missile units just aren't doing what they used to, and they aren't powerful enough to keep up, and that's becoming much more pronounced and much more aggravatingly painful for them. So a big part of what Ice had as a huge advantage, and like a meta advantage outside of just their element, but they were the range team. They could hit you really hard from a distance. There's a lot of new Ice stuff here to replace it, but I'm not sure any of it does quite as great a job as that did. So we're still looking for that Ice hero to rally the troops and make a team work. We need an S tier Ice unit essentially to for the stuff that we have now to rally around. And there's again a lot of A tier options for Ice units, but again just not really a champion to pull it together and push it over the edge. And we also have Wind in a pretty unfortunate place. I'm gonna have to say that is Probably going to even have to be maybe a C tier. I guess there's... I don't know. People are using Earth more on offense necessarily than on defense, or a lot of people are running Earth defensive teams. So Earth is mainly used for hunting lightning. It's not necessarily something that has to deal with adverse matchups very often. And that's really where Wind would come in the most handy right now. Wind actually does have an S tier unit and does have its uses in a meta way, but that actually ends up being more of a credit to Rainbow. Wind is great for a one-off, essentially for throwing Edward into a team, or maybe even Joom as a curveball or something that the Earth team that thinks that they've got you beat just can't work their way around, and it's still going to get beaten by a Lightning team despite. So they have value as an element, but their teams, specifically teams built of this element, aren't really good. I mean, in a lot of ways, Edward really was the last great Wind unit that we received, and he's a 90 cost. So his place on top is the most tenuous. In the recent tier list that I showed on this channel, he was actually the only 90 cost unit, though not the only free unit, to make it into the S tier list. And one of, I want to say, one of four 90 cost units to make it into S and A tier combined. So his place up here is really tenuous and largely determined by meta factors. And should those change, again, should there be a different element up top which creates a different kind of chain reaction of how does that element defend itself, he just happens to cover Lightning's weaknesses in a way that's really accessible, especially for strike teams. He's in the right place at the right time, but the rest of the element just isn't. And they're going to be going in the C tier. Which, I guess, brings us to Fire. Woof. Okay, so Fire is actually kind of a hard decision here, because there's bones of a good team, and there's things that could work, but just the possibility of Summer Glaciella being on a Rainbow team, because she mixes in. Her mechanic isn't really tied to element, and it's so powerful already in layering defenses on people, at least physically, that she's just really effective as a curveball. So even like an ice team could run her in the background, and that would probably be more than enough to deal with a fire team in a lot of ways. Which, to be fair, I guess, is a bit of a credit to ice, but it might be one of the biggest credits that they get, ultimately, at least in terms of like a meta strategic standpoint. So that's really scary for them. That's a bit of an issue, because the whole suite of fire evasion is really built and centered around physical. It's not like light, where there is options in terms of how you want to build out your evasion team. It's purely physical. So a water physical tank with an AoE barrier that already like dilutes the power of fire attacks, her alone is enough to counter a fire team, or at least like the current or the previous fire meta. If you are using that team, you have a whole new thing to be scared of. And frankly, I'm thankful that it's just a limited unit for you, because fire hasn't had a ton of time to shine. It'd be nice to get that, and I think that Soul is a step forward for them and will definitely improve their station on this list. But at the moment, I think that Soul gives them a way to refocus, re-rally, and kind of put out a new team that really does compete with a lot of things in the meta and competes well with the top 2 characters at the moment, who are really quite meta-defining. So effectively, I think, that this might not be the case for much longer, and they may skip 1 or even 2 ranks on this board, depending on just how powerful Soul is, especially because he's not a limited unit, so there's just an increasing likelihood of all players pulling him over time, whereas, none of us are just going to randomly pull Summer Glaciella anytime soon. So I think that in the long term he'll be more impactful in the meta, so that might give them a trajectory towards A, but probably... I would say that Fire is C tier at this exact moment, but just by a little bit, and is definitely probably B tier by the time people start getting their souls online and active. Because it's really, again, going to be a big part of revitalizing what Fire can do. So I hope you've appreciated this look at the War of the Visions meta, and hey, if you did, be sure to like and subscribe. I know us YouTubers say it a lot, but well, just do it, and we'll stop saying it. Like, I would be happy. Do you think I want to do this? Just thanks. Okay, finally. I don't know why it took that long. But anyways, thank you for liking the video. It's about time. You could also hit the subscribe button. I'll wait. Just kidding. But the thing that you really should do is check out the link in the description. That is certainly a place to find all the other corners of the Jackie Fox media empire. Doing some fun stuff this Halloween. I want to do a video on kind of the class history of vampires and zombies in horror films, especially classic horror. Because I think that there's definitely like a metaphor here that has lasted for a long time within society, and really only recently started to dissolve as we've remixed all of our culture and mythology into cookie-cutterable, marketable, capitalistic enterprises and franchises. And we kind of lost sight of maybe what some of these horror creatures were trying to tell us all along. So, good way to reconnect to that this Halloween. And also on the main channel, we're digging into some more serious stuff. No easy way to say this, we're going to be talking about this brand new war that the world has gotten itself into. And it's not pretty, but it is important to know what's going on so that when something like this happens in 2 years, you don't make an absolute fucking fool of yourself online like a lot of people are doing right now. And that's why I stay the hell off of social media, which is why you can't just find me on Facebook. You gotta go to that link in the description. Check out all of the places that you can find me online, because I'm not on X. Sorry. See ya, and thanks for watching. I guess that means I'll be seeing you in the next one.